This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is April 30th, 2026.
I'm Scott Lundeboom.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. On today's show, the Whitecaps may be no more, as is the Burnaby Hospital expansion, but hey, at least we get something called a sovereign wealth fund, whatever it is in reality. Support our Patreon wealth fund at patreon.com/politicos. You too can invest in this novel retail product that does not guarantee you any dividends at all, in fact.
But does guarantee you access to the Slack.
Yes, there is some benefit to doing it. It is a real thing. Here in BC, let's start with the story that honestly, neither of us is following that closely, but is, I think, the big story of the week is the Whitecaps might go away. We love sports, Scott, right?
Oh, you can speak for yourself on that one. Outside of like skiing, I'm not the most sporty person, either doing or watching.
I lived in the UK for a couple of years and just never really got into soccer football, but it is important to many people and many people are passionate. The Whitecaps are having a really strong season, I understand, and doing really well, which naturally means it's time for them to get out of Canada and go to Las Vegas. Apparently, an offer has been made to relocate the Whitecaps to Vegas. We don't have confirmation from the Premier. The province hasn't seen any numbers around this. But the team has been complaining for years that they don't make enough money off BC Place, which is owned by the province and not the team. The province negotiated a slightly better deal last year, it sounded like, where they get an extra $1.5 million going to the team. But that's not enough enticement versus what they could get at their own stadium, I guess, in Vegas. So this back and forth has been going on between the owners of the team and basically everyone else in the city who cares and wants it to stay, which includes like Ravi Kalon and Ken Sim and a lot of dedicated fans. And, you know, sports politics is always weird to me, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We've been fairly lucky. We haven't had to do one of these big fights about should we help subsidize some sports team by building them a new stadium. So thankfully that's not been a huge thing here, but that's where a lot of other places end up getting in big political disagreements over. I know we've occasionally seen like some concept stuff for a new Whitecap stadium downtown, but
Sim has pitched something at like the Hastings racetrack area, I think.
I've also seen some stuff for like closer to the downtown waterfront that built out over the water.
A floating stadium would be incredible.
Well, I mean, more on piers or reclaimed land.
Yeah.
But yeah, none of those I think ever got too serious in terms of where they were going.
Yeah, and it's really weird timing too, as BC is just about to be one of the host cities to FIFA World Cup. I remember one of our shows years ago, we talked about when Horgan first became premier, one of the things he did when he got into office is he opened the contract for FIFA World Cup and he said, fuck that, this looks awful for BC, we're not having World Cup. And people got so mad at him. And so they leaked what was in the contract, that it include like these giant exclusion zones and restrictions on just like free movement in the city. And people are like, okay, that seems a bit much.
The courts had to stop working for the duration of it.
Yeah, they did manage to renegotiate some things, obviously, because FIFA is coming. But it was one of those interesting insights of Horgan's era where he took a gamble because he saw something that wasn't good for the province and managed to convince British Columbians. I don't think there's a similar situation here, but it's just like, we know FIFA is a bad organization. I don't know about the Whitecaps ownership. They're not quite like the Canucks ownership, which has its own issues. But yeah, in this case, EB volunteered, I guess, that BC Place is not up for sale to the team, which wasn't something I'd seen anyone else ask or suggest, publicly at least. That's good, I think.
Yeah,
I don't like
even know
public
we were
assets.
considering that one.
I don't like public assets being sold off, so good that that's not on the table. It doesn't sound like buying the team as a public asset is on the table. That has happened in some place. I don't know about MLS or soccer, but I think like the Green Bay Packers is famously one of the few sporting teams, and they do pretty well for football. But yeah, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, it's hardly the sort of thing where there's like a compelling interest for the government to buy and own a sports team. But hey, maybe if they did sell BC Place, they'd have some money in the bank to build some hospitals with. Because apparently we're out of that.
Yeah, it was in the last budget that they were going to defer and delay several infrastructure projects as a way to keep the deficit down.
Euphemistically referred to as repacing projects. Turns out the paces stopped moving.
Yeah, one of those projects was Burnaby General Hospital's Phase 2 expansion, desperately needed as all hospital expansions generally are at this point of closures and wait times.
Yeah, the province has grown a lot too, and it's not been like a lot of new hospital construction.
But the news this week is that the province just outright canceled the agreements to expand the hospital, and the city and people of Burnaby, most of Fraser Health for that matter, are left going, what? Obviously it's expensive to build things right now, but it doesn't tend to get cheaper to build things in the future. If anything, quite the opposite.
No, yeah, the history of construction costs has generally been a pretty one-way street on that one. Only going up, and I think I saw a number. I think it was in the CBC story. Yeah, it's already going to cost them $1.8 million per bed in the new hospital. Yeah, it's expensive on this one, and maybe there are some short-term stuff that's could potentially course correct on that to help bring those costs down a bit. But that would be some stuff related, like if other construction sectors dry up in the face of also increased costs and interest rates going up or staying where they are. Stuff like that could potentially reduce pressure elsewhere or demand elsewhere in the sector. Might be able to bring it down a little bit, but you're not getting significant drops going forward in all likelihood. But that just kind of, I think, raises the question, at least the one I have, of if you have what's the point of this $13 million deficit if you're not actually doing anything with it?
We are treading water with it, is what we're doing. It's hard. It's not a good news story to cancel. The government, particularly Infrastructure Minister Bowen Ma, is out there trying to spin this as not actually being cancelled. Just, the project's still ongoing. We're just canceling the contracts. I guess with the implication that it might be picked up somewhere down the road. But that's a cancel. The government just should be clear with everyone on this that it's actually canceling these. The only way they could prove that they are committed to advancing plans on the project, as they say, is to show us they are going to sign a new contract to finish it with some kind of timeline, because it's on the list to be built, I'm sure, but without people to build it, it's not happening, just straight up. So cool.
So yeah, this is yet another bad news story for a government that is just seems to be tripping over them left, right, and center. When was the last time the BC government had a good news story?
Here's one. They just won a lawsuit. The Supreme Court has rendered its decision in the challenge to the Legal Professions Act overhauls and sided with the government in this case.
Yeah, this is the BC Supreme Court, just for reference on that, which is the weirdly named trial court here, not the highest appellate court in the country or the province. But weird court nomenclature aside, the government back in 2024 passed a bill with a new regulatory structure for lawyers, notaries, and other legal professionals. This is, part of a broader move to kind of update professional governance across the province. Engineers, foresters, and like a couple other professions were done in the Professional Governance Act changes back in the Horgan government. They're also moving forward with some healthcare ones at the moment that none of the cranks seem to like. And that was
to their defense. I know, like, generally NDP supporting people in healthcare who are unhappy with that. I don't agree with them necessarily on this, but like, it's not just cranks who are mad. Like, people in those fields feel like the government is meddling with them. And that's why there was a big lawsuit that a lot of lawyers supported here, but it lost.
Yeah. So the changes, bringing a bunch of the professions under the same body. The government also structured the board of the new regulator to have a couple government-appointed persons on it. Nowhere near a majority or anything. But it was enough to upset a bunch of lawyers, as well as I think there were complaints that they were also now going to be regulated by notaries and other people from the other professions on the board, and the lawyers weren't happy with that, which maybe a little bit of professional arrogance on that one. But at the end of the day, they brought a lawsuit arguing that it was a charter violation, among other things, to have a professional regulator with more than 0 people appointed by the government on it.
You get a bunch of lawyers challenging something, they're going to throw all the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And in this case, it didn't stick.
There was some pretty ridiculous spaghetti they threw on it, arguing that the right to free association was violated by this, as if belonging to a professional regulator as part of your professional licensing is somehow a violation of the right to association. There was some nutty stuff argued.
To be fair, the Section 2D doesn't get tried very much, so I feel a little bad for that section.
I feel like it's obvious on the face, though, that there's no imperilment of it because it's a regulator. It's not like any old, it's not like the lawyers got together and formed hey, we're a bunch of lawyers that want a social network or raise.
It's not even a union, right?
Yeah,
unions have been protected under Section 2D.
This is literally if you want to be regulated, you have to follow the rules of the regulator, and that all seems fine.
So we'll see how it goes. I know the lawyers are eager to appeal this. Like, on their side, they do feel there is a strong, freedom of the courts kind of issue. Like, everyone should have the ability to challenge the government, and that means lawyers need to be independent beyond any question. And the structural changes here to them are an affront to that principle. Like you, I don't fully share that view, but I can understand where it's coming from at least. And so I get why they want to challenge it, but we'll see how far this goes, if anywhere.
I just have a hard time with that because ultimately this is a regulation that the government has empowered the Bar Association, or whatever the new organization is called, to do the regulation on behalf of the government. But ultimately, this is a government power that is being executed here, and it's entirely reasonable for the government to have a say in how that goes. So, fundamentally, I just the idea that the government can't direct to pretty much any degrees here how an organization that implicitly has the power of the state behind it is just a little nutty to me.
Let's jump to federal politics, because there wasn't actually a lot else that happened provincially this past week. I think
Yeah,
the
EB
legislature... Go ahead.
Yeah, EB managed to make it a whole week without face planting on Drippa. So, good for him. We'll see if he can make it another couple weeks. We had like 1 or 2 weeks in the past month or so where he managed to not change course on that. So, gotta wait till like sometime in May to really say that he's at least momentarily moved off the issue.
Well, and for the opposition's part, I know the BC Conservatives had a leadership debate, but I didn't watch it because I didn't want to subject myself to that. And they did announce that they've paid off their debt, that they've raised enough money through their leadership race that they are not in the $5 million debt that their annual reports showed. So that's some good news for them, I guess. It's always nice to have your political party able to have money if you're hoping to one day challenge an election. But we'll keep our eye on that race as it shapes up over the next month as we close in on their vote. I forget the exact date, but I think it's coming up this month. Federal politics is where it's at, though, as we got the spring economic update. This is all part of Carney's restructuring the budgeting process. So we get the budget in the fall, which was the first time last year, and a spring economic update instead of a fall economic update. The bills associated with this, I believe, should become confidence motions, but as we'll discuss, he's got a pretty safe majority, even if it's only by a couple seats there. But what did the spring economic update tell us, Scott?
Well, tells us the government finances aren't quite as bad as it was looking based off the last budget in the fall. So the deficit is down by about $11 billion from 78 to 69. So that's good. The economy is doing a little better than expected. It's been proved a little more resilient than a lot of people were worried about. And there's, the economy's not out of the woods by any means, but there's some positive signs. Things are slowly taking the right direction. They highlight that direct investment in Canada is up. Disappointingly, they don't give a lot of context in terms of how that stats up compared to previous. Well, I didn't find a chart in there, at least in my quick search through on it. But that's been a notable weak point in Canada for at least a decade, is that direct investment has been incredibly lackluster. So some good stuff like that. Like for a thing that is more of an economic update, it, I think, did the work it was supposed to. But, these things are now also mini budgets where you do more than just provide some numbers on how things are going. You announce new stuff. And the big one this week, the big one in this announcement was the thing they leaked the night before of we're getting our own sovereign wealth fund, kind of.
The Canada Strong Fund that they call our own sovereign wealth fund, which will strengthen our economy and give Canadians direct stake in its success, as though we don't already have a stake in the success of this country that we live in. So a sovereign wealth fund, for those who have not come across it, is the idea that a state takes its excess wealth and invests it largely in itself, but as a way to, like, imagine this. I have a bunch of money myself. I'm going to put it in the bank and live off the interest. That's the dream. That's what Norway has done with its oil money. That's what Alberta started to do and has about 25 billion, which is respectable. Usually you take your surplus, and once you've eliminated your deficit, this is now your asset. Yeah, what Carney is doing is unclear, but it's not that. Yeah,
so there's kind of two models on this. There's the Norway one, and kind of similar Gulf oil states one of you have a bunch of resource revenue on a resource that is not going to be renewable, that is finite, and you take the money that you're earning from that, stick it in the fund, invest it overseas. this is a pretty important part because the point of these things is to diversify away from just a couple industries in the country. So you buy a bunch of assets overseas, buy a bunch of stocks in foreign companies, etc., and build a long-term base of wealth for the country using the resource revenue as a seed on that one. That's, like you said, kind of what Alberta has on and off attempted to do. Or you have kind of, your Singapore example, where Singapore is a city-state that is not endowed with much in the way of natural resources, but it's an incredibly successful polity that runs a pretty tight financial ship, and with that, they have a surplus, and that surplus gets plowed into an investment fund that more or less does the same thing.
For reference, Norway's is over $2 trillion US right now in assets, which is what? Is that the size of the US debt?
Well, no, the U.S. debt just hit. I saw this week that it hit a 100% of GDP, which would put it probably close to 16 trillion, 20 trillion.
Okay, so it's in the same ish realm. Oh, maybe it's 38 trillion actually. All right, it's gone up quite a bit in the last 20 years.
2 trillion is about Canada's GDP.
It's a good amount of money.
It's most of the way of Canada's GDP. I think it's about 2.5 trillion now.
Yeah. So Carney, for his wealth fund, it's going to take it's unclear yet. He's going to consult on this, but he's not taking resource revenues. He's going to take...
He can't. Constitutionally, the resource revenues don't belong to the federal government.
There's some tax revenues. It's kind of indirect resource revenues that they collect, right? Corporate income tax revenues. But they're it's really not clear where they're getting the money other than just redirecting existing capital to it.
Well, there's a few options here. One is, the Conservatives have branded this, a sovereign debt fund of the government's right now running a pretty significant deficit. The $78 billion announced in the budget was by far the highest deficit Canada's ever had. And then...
So far.
Yeah. It might not be entirely as a percent of GDP, but it's up. Definitely in terms of raw dollar value. It's up there. But yeah, so you either are going to be borrowing money to fund this thing, in which case you're just adding on to the federal debt, and it's all debt finance. So it's not the greatest way to do it. You're not really building wealth at that point. You're just taking on debt that might even out some of the assets you're buying on that. There's the retail side of this, where they're going to create an opportunity for Canadians to invest in this thing. Even just how that works is confusing. I've seen discussions of maybe they'll be selling bonds to Canadians, which, okay, that's just A, another form of debt, and B, that kind of lots Canadians out of the upside. Yeah, it's a guaranteed return of whatever the yield on that is, but you're not getting the benefits of equity in that you capture all the upside to it. It's set amount you get every cycle on that one. And then there's also something about recycling assets, which is unclear on exactly what it means. There's been various reporting on that, but the government's been less than clear, other than everything is on the table.
Including, they've been talking this week about considering selling airports, which has gotten a pretty universally negative response, I guess, except from billionaires who want to buy airports.
Yeah, even the people who I've seen are more in favor of privatization aren't super stoked on this one. And I think that's because it's clear they're pitching this as a quick cash infusion for something that is already a little dubious as a project on here, because of all the reasons we list, and there are several more, which we'll get into. But it's like clearly being used as a cash thing if they're going that route. And if they were pitching it more as this is a way to actually improve the functioning of airports, that's a lot more defensible. Most European airports have some degree of privatization. Hell, Canada, through its various pension funds and investment funds overseas, actually owns a chunk of airports in Europe. Looking this up, and Caisse de Quebec's big fund, they own like 5% of Heathrow or something. That and all the airports that Heathrow's parent company owns. So it's like air travel in Europe works pretty well. It's not obviously a problem that airports are run on a different model than Canada currently runs them on. But that's not the argument they're making on this one. It's not we think there are better models for how to run airports. It's we're looking for a quick cash infusion, which is why I think there hasn't been a positive response. I mean, the NDP and the left are going to criticize it for the reasons they will always criticize this, and fair enough on that. But yeah, there's a notable lack of wow, this is a good idea from the right, which you would normally expect a degree of that in the case of a privatization proposal.
So coming back to the fund, they are going to put $25 billion in right away in cash. Again, we don't know where that's coming from. Just $25 billion in cash. And then it will exist as this crown corporation that invests in private projects.
Mostly Canadian ones.
Yeah, domestic ones largely.
Which also really cuts against the sovereign wealth fund idea.
Yeah, like Norway's thing is its pension fund that just got invested with a bunch of oil money. This is just the infrastructure bank, right? That's all this is. But like you can buy a stock in it or a bond in it.
Yeah, or the Business Development Bank or the Canada Business Development Bank. Canada has a bunch of different crown corporations that's point is to invest in Canada. It is incredibly unclear what the point of yet another one is. There was even one at one point that was available for the average Canadian to invest in if they wanted to, and had very little update, and they eventually just ended that program. So yeah, the point of all of this is unclear and really feels like a duplication of a lot of other things, and you kind of get the impression that the Liberals just think the problem is we have a half dozen of these things, and maybe if we just put one more in place, one more regional development agency, one more development or infrastructure bank, one more Invest in Canada fund, that'll somehow make the difference. And just seems pretty doubtful that that's going to be the case.
It's wonderful, right? It's a kind of idea that makes the right mad because they're going, where are you funding this from? It's just debt. And then the left, like Avi Lewis's response is, this is a mirror image of what Norway's sovereign wealth fund is. This is taking public money and seeding it into private projects. Like when we've had Seth Klein on the show to talk about the climate emergency, and one of the ideas he's pitched is green victory bonds, right? To let Canadians invest in a green transition. This isn't that. It could be, but it doesn't seem like it's got any clear goal. It's other than just like promote Canadian investments. But
yeah, well, the more concerning part I've seen is some of the comments, I think from McKinnon and maybe Prime Minister in Champagne, is around that it would be a good thing for Canadians to invest in because the projects that this invests in are going to get favorable regulatory treatment, and this is going to allow Canadians to capture the upside of it, which also potentially means they're thinking of kind of a quid pro quo for companies that are putting forward major projects where the government is going to demand a stake in them in order to get them over the regulatory finish line, which is a little corrupt in its basic structure. And yeah, they haven't come out and said that, but there have been statements that certainly point in that direction, and that would also be a bad model and road to go down on this. And yeah, we mentioned off the top of the segment about how that Canada's had a investment deficit for quite a while. And kind of like the Major Projects Office, this feels like trying to throw a patch onto something rather than doing the hard work of figuring out why, despite a lot of things going for Canada, a well-educated population with high human capital, a abundance of natural resources, etc., that the people with the money look at Canada and go, I don't think it's worth investing there. They're not doing any of the work to try and make that better and figure out why investment in the country has been so lackluster. They're just throwing another Crown Corporation and big fund at it and trying to patch over it rather than actually do the work of making the country work well and bringing in reforms to enable that.
Well, there is more in the spring economic update than just the Sovereign Wealth Fund. There's kind of 4 planks they put in their summary graphic. That's the Sovereign Wealth Fund. The next is their training, their skills training program, their Team Canada Strong, Jesus Christ, is their new effort to train and recruit 80 to 100,000 new Red Seal skilled trade workers by 2031. Basically putting up $2 billion to help young people start working in skilled trades with new apprenticeship funds for employers, topping up the training grants, and stuff that I think generally most across the spectrum are pretty supportive of, but it's one of those things that I keep seeing promised and have yet to see it. It's one of those things I guess it's hard to measure in post, but I don't know. It's good.
I'm a little confused on the number they gave there because according to StatsCan, there are already about 40,000 Red Seal certifications issued every year. So if anything, we're going to put 100,000, we're going to have 100,000 by 2030 would be a slowdown. So maybe that's net in addition to the current rate, but it's badly spelled out if that's the case.
According to their numbers, they say in 2024 more than 100,000 new apprenticeships registered, but only 34,000 completed. If nothing changes, Canada will face a persistent gap of 20,000 skills trade workers per year. And by 2033, we need 1.4 million more. So their goal is to, I think, increase our hiring, not just our recruitment, by 80 to 100,000. So that'll be on top of the number signing up right now.
So they're just top level infographic was a little
summary.
Yeah,
and
a little poorly summarized on
yeah.
that.
And they also want to ensure through here, part of this, there's a pathway to skills trade through the armed forces. A lot of this whole economic update is placed within the context of Carney's emphasis on growing the military as well.
Yeah, and that's good, because one of the problems with people transitioning to civilian life is not being super easy to get military experience, particularly where there is an overlap on there recognized. So that would actually be a really good thing to both improve the number of people able to get into the trades as well as helping veterans out on that. And hopefully there's been a pretty persistent skills shortage on a while, and would also help the construction cost issues like we talked about earlier. I'm curious to see if this will actually happen, because back when I was in high school, Jesus, 20 years, has it been that long? We're getting old. But even back then, I remember there was quite a bit of effort going into encouraging people to look at the trades. And in those 2 decades, there really hasn't been fixed. So I'm curious how much throwing some more money at it is really going to resolve the problem here.
Well, speaking of throwing money at things, the number one priority for most Canadians continues to be affordability. So there's naturally a section on affordability in here, but it doesn't actually contain a lot to help most people. They talk a little bit about money for home building, including accelerating some planned low-cost loans for construction of 16,500 new rental homes, which nationally is a drop in the bucket. They are going to lower the contribution rate for the Canada Pension Plan from 9.9% to 9.5%, which has the support of provinces and territories. That'll save workers a couple $100 a year.
Yeah, this is also reverses or partially reverses he changed the Trudeau government made where they raised the CPP contribution rate. But
I think it's a little, it might be a little more. I think there's a secondary rate.
Yeah,
I don't fully understand how my money gets taken and put into the pension plan. I believe this is just basically a way for them to say, hey, we looked at the stability of the pension plan and we don't need to collect as much to guarantee you get as much when you retire.
Yeah, because the CPP fund is also huge. It's close to $1 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's the closest thing we have to some well fund in the country. Yeah, excluding the Alberta one, which I feel like gets a pretty big asterisk considering how that thing's been managed on there. I guess also bodes well that the plan is well funded at the moment and it's pretty sustainable in the long term, which is good.
And the other bit of the affordability section is actually a pretty welcome change across a lot of sectors, is making the disability tax credit a little bit easier to get. I've gone through this process recently for one of our children, and the disability tax credit is a big benefit. It basically lets you write off $10,000 of tax-free income as an adult or $15,000 for a child. And it can be retroactive, often for many years. But the CRA is very strict about who gets it because they need to see significant impediments in your day-to-day functioning to qualify for it. And so you have to have a medical practitioner sign off on it. It has to go to the CRA and they have to review it. And what they're changing is they're saying, all right, there are some diseases and disabilities that obviously affect people severely, like Alzheimer's. We don't need to look at every single Alzheimer's disability tax credit application and decide whether they are actually having a real impact on their life. We could just say, hey, a medical practitioner says you has Alzheimer's. Here's your tax credit. And that's the simplification. They're greenlighting certain disabilities for it, which is a pretty welcome step. It doesn't solve all of the issues with it, but getting the disability tax credit is also important because then it opens the door to a dozen other programs that are out there in the federal and provincial governments to support people with disabilities. So that's pretty welcome change that a lot of people have called for.
Yeah, it's a pretty welcome one and good to see. There's I think that was announced in the federal budget, though.
I think they started talking about it.
There's a few things here that are carrying on. The Financial Crimes Agency that they had announced in that budget is getting fleshed out a little bit with more money put towards it.
Money cops.
Yeah, good. We need to take some of the RCMP's workload and divide it out among specialty agencies. That would be good. They're extending the favorable tax treatment for the sale of businesses to their employees in here. they keep talking up the various housing funds they have going, although considering that Calgary's backpedaled on their commitments to it and are still getting money from it, I think there's a lot to be desired in how that's actually being run, and the effectiveness of not actually providing any accountability is pretty dubious on that one.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, which I've not seen got a lot of attention on here, is the AI strategy that it's coming soon. They actually put in here what the core tenets of it are going to be, or the principles that are underlying it, which surprised hasn't actually gotten more play on that one.
Oh, I totally missed that, yeah. What are the core tenets if you have it up?
Yeah, well, they call them pillars. So, Pillar 1, protecting Canadians and safeguarding democracy. Basically, they're regulating it to be in the public interest and not do any of the sketchy stuff that's happening. So, modernizing privacy and online safety laws with AI in mind. Empowering Canadians, i.e. job training and...
making sure there's French AI.
That's for all Canadians by representing and including Canadian voices, languages, and culture.
French AI.
Yeah, French AI.
And possibly some indigenous languages, but French AI.
So, Claude will probably now become Jean-Pierre Claude for that. Pillar 3, powering AI adoption for shared prosperity.
Pro-worker industrial AI technologies.
Yeah.
Sure.
And helping small and medium-sized businesses on that. Building a Canadian Sovereign AI Foundation. Scaling up Canadian champions. That's pillars 4 and 5. I'm not actually sure we have much in the way of AI champions at the moment. That's part of a bigger conversation we should be having in our country of why we basically have no large tech companies or ones that have a big chance to become the next large tech company in Canada. And finally, building trusted partnerships and global alliances. So, working with other countries on this sort of thing. Yeah, as far as it goes, it seems like a pretty unobjectionable list, but, like everything, the devil will be in the details when we get that at some point.
So overall, the parliamentary budget officer has already, the new one has already chimed in on this, and her view is there's not the substance and the details here that she was looking for. Her office will be following off with a lot more analysis in the next few weeks, which I'll look forward to. But she describes it as, quote, a range of new and rather undefined priorities, strategies, and general objectives that would benefit from greater accountability, details on governance, and other aspects of planning. Because there's like $54.5 billion in new costs in this since November, and they've still managed to bring the deficit down. So that's that good financial management that just happens to coincide with a giant uptick in resource revenues and probably corporate tax return.
Yeah, that's no doubt a big part of it. That's it. Like the
$25 fund for the sovereign wealth fund or whatever they're calling it is not on the line items. And Francois Philippe Champagne said that's standard practice to not account for $25 billion.
I mean, that seems a little questionable.
It's a cruel accounting, Scott.
Yeah, someone also pointed out in that the debt to GDP numbers are kind of pretty heavily, or net debt to GDP numbers were kind of juiced to look a little more favorable by doing things like counting all of the various government pension plans, including CPP, in their asset list, which is kind of a little questionable because that money is spoken for Canadians' retirement on that, and is not there to help offset the federal or provincial debts on there. So yeah, definitely some things that could be improved on this, and I would sure like to see a lot more information on what this sovereign wealth fund that seems like nothing like a typical sovereign wealth fund is going to be. Because right now I don't love the thought of it, or don't love the what we have on it so far, and it is undershot what I would have expected from a Canadian sovereign wealth fund, even with the somewhat low expectations I had of the federal government on that front. Like, I thought we'd at least be doing it when we had somewhere close to a surplus. and this also got me thinking, like, why doesn't BC have one? We take in about $3 billion a year in resource revenue, and the largest chunk of that, at least in the last budget, was LNG royalties. Like, shouldn't we be... the provincial finances weren't such a disaster with a $13 billion deficit, but like, why aren't we looking at stocking some of that away for the future?
It's bizarrely not even on the conversation here, but you're right. It could be something we talk about.
At $3 billion, we could catch up with Alberta pretty quick.
Well, we'd have to raise taxes to cover our day-to-day expenses to manage that. But there are things for the federal government to invest in. One of them that Carney has admitted could use some money this week is his home that he's not allowed to live in because it's full of rats and falling apart. 24 Sussex Drive.
Don't forget the asbestos.
Yes, asbestos is... Well, that's a Canadian heritage. It's a piece of our country's sovereignty is asbestos mining.
I mean, yeah, there's also molds and lead, which are less uniquely Canadian.
True.
Yeah, so it's a disaster. And Carney's at least now sounded like he's open to the possibility of tearing down and rebuilding.
He said he wants he wants his successor to be able to live in it, which I think is a good line, right? Because Canadian prime ministers are too cheap to say they want to live in it, but saying, I want to fix it so that whoever succeeds me can live there is one I think can be understood and appreciated.
At least gives enough cover to get it done.
And it should be done.
Yeah.
It is an embarrassment, as he says. So
because the current stopgap option's not great. We'll meet the needs of the prime minister, plus even before it got to be uninhabitable, the 21st Sussex was pretty poorly suited to the sort of state functions one would expect of a head of government's official residence.
So he might have some money for his residence, but he apparently doesn't have money for pharmacare expansion, as the Newfoundland health minister has said to the government, we're not being offered a deal. We'll remember that Trudeau, with the requirement from the NDP under Jagmeet Singh, announced that there would be a pharmacare plan, and we will start with contraceptives and diabetes medications. And I think BC, Manitoba, I think there was maybe a
Yukon and PEI.
Okay, have all signed deals, but the rest were in negotiations. And Carney said those negotiations would kind of continue, and he's always been kind of vague. Now Newfoundland has said the door was closed on our province, and I've heard it said, but I don't have this confirmed, that PEI is being told theirs is a pilot project that will not be renewed, which is suggesting the brief flirtation with pharmacare may be coming to an end in this country.
Yeah, flirtation might be a good way to start, because even if they had just stayed the course on it, it only covered a pretty narrow range of pharmaceuticals on this.
Still very helpful to women and people with diabetes.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying, we're pretty far from an actual, true pharmacare program on this.
It's just wild to start going backsliding on that, but
I mean, I could even, I could understand, not expanding it further. The, how this is handled sure seems poorly done.
This is just opening opportunities for Avi Lewis to just get headlines that are good for him. He's just been soaking it up for a couple weeks.
Yeah, and
I'm not saying he's winning, but he's doing well. But he's just being handed softballs.
Yeah, and it hurts the federal-provincial relationships. I think there's a pretty solid argument that the net dollar of federal funding ought to go to the very important work of supporting Canadian sovereignty and economic resilience. and that putting vast amounts of money towards a new social program is probably not the top priority in the country for the time being.
Sounds like economic resilience to have people not going broke trying to buy their drugs. To me,
it's not going to be the thing that is going to shield the country from the fallout of the trade relationship with the U.S. getting disrupted and continuing to get disrupted, nor is it going to be the thing that makes it so that Canada is able to exert itself more on the international stage and can back itself up with greater economic heft and hard power.
Having a multinational defense bank in this country somehow.
Yeah, we're apparently getting that. The NATO one that has been in the works for a while. This is the NATO one, right? It's not a joint EU-Canada thing? Yes, NATO and allied nations on that. Yeah. It's apparently now going to Canada, which I think took a lot of people by surprise. Does it sure seem like it was going to be the sort of thing that was probably going to end up somewhere in Europe?
It belongs in Western Europe.
Yeah, I would have guessed Frankfurt or something, the near the German financial capital.
Or even London, but yeah.
Paris maybe?
It may go. The French don't seem financial enough for this. No
yeah, but they're one of the better military powers in Europe.
Apparently it might go to Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, or Vancouver are the 4 Canadian cities who've put their names forward. So
Vancouver sure seems last on that list.
It is the farthest from the rest of NATO.
Farthest from the rest of NATO is not also a financial center the way Toronto is, or a government center the way Ottawa is.
Vancouver has a long history of financial crimes and grifts. What are you talking about? Could totally go here. Oh well, we'll see where it lands. I guess it's a good news story for Carney, as he has. And yeah,
probably, I think kind of maybe a sign that the Prime Minister is actually wielding Canadian influence abroad with some diplomatic finesse on this one, and that there's many foreign trips have some payoff on this, and that's good because the Canada's position globally has not done well over the past 10 years, so a return to that would be good.
It wasn't doing great for the 10 years before that either.
Got a lot worse though.
It had a couple years in 2015, 2016. It had a little bit of energy, but then
everyone clued in that Trudeau was only there for the photo ops at the various summits, and nothing ever got backed up with actual action or resources.
No. Finally, 2 more by-elections will be coming up as Jonathan Wilkinson, the MP for Vancouver North Vancouver, has been announced as the next EU envoy for Mark Carney, and Alexandre Boulerice, NDP MP for Rosemount-Le Petit Patrie, is going to quit federal politics to run for Quebec Solidaire in the provincial election there. The North Van seat seems pretty safe Liberal. The Conservatives would have to be riding a really high wave to win that, and the NDP has not been above 10% there in quite a few elections, so not theirs to, make a big splash in. Rosemont in Quebec is interesting. Boulerice has held that really consistently since he first ran for them in 2011, and he took the seat from the Bloc. I don't know if it's a Boulerice seat or if he's managed to build the party enough that it could also hold for the NDP, but it will be a real test for Avi Lewis to see how that goes. It's
probably Boulerice seat just because the NDP is just not doing well anywhere, very much, and particularly Quebec, they've had a hard time maintaining themselves ever since the Orange Wave, which was 15 years ago. So I would wager it's probably not an NDP hold, or a decent chance that it goes to a different party. But
it's going to be a three-way race, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be the one to watch.
So I'll keep my eyes on that.
Yeah,
for some reason
ruled out running for both of them or either of them.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, fair enough on the Quebec one, but like it's, even though it was an NDP seat, but it's the Wilkinson one's at least in his backyard, and maybe sit out one or two, but like if he keeps sitting these out, it's going to be hard to, or there's going to be a credibility loss that'll come with it. So
I don't know. It seems like there's a by-election every 6 weeks with this parliament at the rate they're going. So lots of opportunities will present themselves.
Yes, whether he'll take any up, because he said doesn't want to ask Cygna MP to step down, and that leaves very few options for a reasonable shot at success on running on any of those.
Apparently, Bouleris is already an independent. Oh, I guess to become a member of Quebec Solidaire, he can't be in the NDP because there is still technically a Quebec NDP party.
Really?
I maybe, but that was such a failed effort.
It's just like
they revived
6 people
in 2014,
in Montreal, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just somewhere they can collect some donations. But yeah, the Quebec election will be quite interesting to watch as well, for better or worse. And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicos is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.